to be back to track. Yeah, I think we should start. So to provide some background on how this paper came to be, we have to go back to 2008, when the castle that houses the collection on the main exhibition of the Gorenska Museum received European funding for renovation. Part of the courtyard and adjunct building of Kieselstein Castle were excavated before construction could commence. Numerous sites have been excavated in Kran, but this particular one was recently published in a form of an extensive site report. 2 out of 3 authors of this presentation are closely linked with the site as well. Dr. Urankar was one of the leading archaeologists at the excavation project and the editor of the subsequent publication. And Dr. Verena Vidrih Perko is a curator for archaeology at the said museum and oversaw the Roman period ceramic material from the site. I, on the other hand, had just enrolled into undergrad archaeology course in Ljubljana at that time, but was later trained in the Gorenska Museum during the course of 2 years. So modern day Kran has been occupied since prehistory. The firm's confirmed settlement is known from the Neolithic period, likely the elevated rocky hilltop situated on the confluence of the river Sava here and the river Kokra, and is surrounded by fertile lowlands and was, because of this, of great strategic importance, especially if it controlled an important crossing of the Sava. 2 phases of occupation are distinguishable for the prehistoric period. The first is from the transition between the late Bronze Age in the early Iron Age, with the carbon dating broadly pointing to the 9th to 7th century BC. And the second phase came at the end of the Iron Age in the 1st century BC. Interestingly, evidence of the Roman settlement was mostly missing until the excavations in first decades of 2000, including also the excavations at the castle Kieselstein, which is situated here. In the Roman period, Carnium, the 2 distinct phases of occupation can be traced in the material culture. The first is from the early Roman period in Slovenia, more precisely from the mid-Augustan period. The second phase of occupation comes in late antiquity, from which the hypocaust and potential glass workshops were recovered. The earlier phase on which we will be focusing likely followed the annexation of Noricum in 15 BC and the development of Colonia Julia Aemona established in the late Augustan or early Tiberian period. Carnium belonged to the Ager of Colonia Julia Aemona. The latter was the easternmost town of the 10th region of Italy and as such controlled the land routes toward east, enabling the later spread of Roman Empire towards Pannonia and beyond. According to the damaged inscription from Aemona, the town's wall was constructed in 14 or 15 AD. But even though Aemona was built ex novo and as an urbs quadrata, it could hardly have literally appeared out of nowhere, only in 14 or 15 AD. Much more likely, the gradual spread of Roman culture towards the east and north across what is now Slovenia has started as early as with the establishment of Aquileia, roughly 2 centuries before Aemona. And there are, in fact, finds that predate 14 AD and suggest a settlement on the other bank of the river Ljubljanica from the later colony. The area around Carnium was strategically important for several reasons, not only its location. An obvious and often quoted factor is the presence of limonite ore, which could be found in abundance on the surface and was of great metallurgical value. It is similar to the famed ferrum noricum, praised by Gallienus for its durable sharpness. Moreover, ore processing was not new to the area, and the relevant expertise of the pre-Roman inhabitants was likely valuable as well. The second most important factor were probably the lowlands to the southeast of Carnium, which constitute the flattest and most fertile area within Aemona's Ager. So this, I would say this area here. The marshlands to the south of Aemona were obviously difficult to cultivate, and on the east and west it's flanked by hills. Last but not least, the position of Carnium itself is elevated, overseeing and controlling two valleys, one larger extending to northwest towards modern-day Austria, so here, and other smaller west-southwest towards the coast in direction of Aquileia. That goes roughly here. In the center of modern Kran, a small number of military finds were uncovered, comprising mostly pieces of straps, nails, buttons, and also including a crest fitting. The Roman military must therefore have been present at Carnium for at least a short period of time, and small units of soldiers likely guarded the Sava crossing. The presence of auxiliary units seems likely as well. A spectacular grave that has been interpreted as potentially belonging to an auxiliary blacksmith was found only a good 4 kilometers north from our site with the oil lamp. So by now, you must surely be asking yourself, but what does all of this have to do with the crocodiles and queens and such? Amongst the early Roman finds from 2008 and 2009 excavations at Kieselstein was also an oil lamp with a very curious motive. The oil lamp in question belongs to Loschke type 1 and was most likely subvariant A. Due to the fine make and fabric, it's likely that the lamp was a product of a northern Italian workshops from the Augustan or Tiberian period. The motif on the discus refers to the Battle of Actium in 30 BC, where Cleopatra and Mark Antony lost to Octavian, after which Egypt was annexed and became a Roman province. At the bottom of the depiction, it's a heavily stylized warship, which instantly evokes the image of naval battle. Above it are two crocodiles, which are symbolically linked with Egypt. Atop the reptiles is a container, likely a water jar or similar object, surrounded by two dolphins. And the combined imagery strongly alludes to Rome's victory over Egypt. If read on deeper level that requires a more detailed knowledge of Roman mythology and symbolism, the dolphins could be linked to Venus and the Julio-Claudian dynasty, to which Augustus belonged and which triumphed over Cleopatra and Mark Antony, represented by the two crocodiles. The motif of a crocodile chained to a palm is echoed in 3 coin halves found nearby. The crocodile on the reverse represents Cleopatra and Egypt. The palm is symbol of victory. One of the coins was minted in 27 BC and 2 between 16 and 10 BC in Colonia Nemausus, modern-day Nîmes in southern France, to commemorate the victory in the Battle of Actium in 30 BC. The obverse of these coins originally depicted both Augustus and his general Marcus Agrippa. It is interesting to note that the 3 coins from our side, so those 3, have been cut through the middle. While all 3 remaining halves show a crocodile, 2 of them feature the bust of Augustus and 1 a bust of Marcus Agrippa, suggesting that the image of the crocodile was perhaps more important in this context than the victorious general or even the emperor himself. Across the Roman Empire, coins were sometimes chosen for deposition based on the symbolism of their legends as funerary or other religious offerings. Likewise, the practice of cutting coins in half was not at all a rarity, as halved coins can represent up to 58% of all coins found at sites across southeastern Alps and Illyricum in late Augustan and Tiberian period. That all 3 coins from Carnium were cut in the same way suggests a common intention centered around the crocodile. Besides the 3 half specimens, 5 further coins were unearthed at our site, but they were too damaged to be further analyzed. Another non-halved coin found at nearby site also depicts both busts and a crocodile and could be potentially dated to 27 BC, the one at the bottom. We can tackle the obvious question, what are these crocodiles doing here, from at least 2 points of view. First, the intention behind the making of such objects and putting them on the market. From the sheer number of oil lamps found across the empire, we can be fairly sure that they were a popular object to have in the Roman period. This probably has a lot to do with their practicality. The relatively pleasant smell of burning olive oil in comparison with lard, the fact that oil lamps emit little soot compared to torches, and that they are not overly expensive, unlike wax candles. The market for such objects was therefore vast, especially as they were used in everyday life as well as in rituals and as grave goods. A mass-produced affordable item that could be additionally enhanced with imagery to make them even more appealing, oil lamps soon appeared with a plethora of motifs derived from mythology, religion, everyday life, gladiator games, and more. Judging by the formidable sample of Aemonas cemeteries, animals were very popular choice, at least in the funerary setting. Animals and other motifs could be perceived by the makers, or designers, if you will, as a medium of propaganda. In times where there were no mass media as we know them today, oil lamps and coins paired with statues in forums and large settlements would serve as a visual reminder of political realities. In case of our oil lamp, the crocodile could be seen as a metaphor for Egypt in general, or Cleopatra and Mark Antony specifically, since they used the crocodile as emblem for their daughter Cleopatra Selene II on a coin, likely to evoke the connection with the Ptolemaic Empire. In this sense, Augustus simply adopted the symbolism and repurposed it to his own ends. A different, highly speculative approach might point out that since the sex of crocodile embryos is not determined genetically, but depends on the ambient temperature to which the eggs are exposed, the choice of crocodile could have been intended as an allusion to Cleopatra's reputation for deviant sexuality. That being said, if the intentions were indeed to cast Cleopatra in unfavorable light, there are much more explicit and direct examples of how this could be done, such as Horace Cleopatra Ode and a certain oil lamp motif, such we can see on the screen. On the other hand, dolphins could signify either simply the sea, where the crucial battle was lost, or Neptune, who granted Romans the victory, or even Venus, who was the mythological ancestor of Julio-Claudian dynasty. From an imperialistic point of view, the symbolic mass assemblage would serve as warning that it was Augustus himself who had subdued the dangerous opponent embodied by the crocodiles. On the ideological level, Augustus, who was advocating for the reformation of Roman society towards more modesty, had won against the deviant East. To address the second approach toward what the crocodiles are doing here issue, we should stop for a moment and return to the setting in which these artifacts were found. We have to ask ourselves, who in Carnium would have been able to take the oil lamp and the coins into their hands and deduce all this from the artifacts? Would the average inhabitant of Carnium recognize the crocodile and its meaning? It is relatively safe to assume that the sight of a living crocodile was indeed not an everyday occurrence, and the chances of live specimen having been in Carnium are very slim. Any knowledge about the animal, including its reproductive cycle, was likely minimal among the general population. Even in Rome, crocodiles arrived relatively late, making their first appearance in arena in 58 BC. Additionally, in comparison with the Republican period, where the crocodile was only one of many animals representing Egypt, in the imperial imagery, the crocodile was the most frequently occurring animal in Nilotic landscapes and a typical symbol for Egypt, Alexandria, and the Nile on imperial coinage issued even by the later emperors such as Hadrian or Caracalla. We know that several distinguished North Italian trading families who could have understood the symbolism behind the crocodile motif, such as the Barbi and Caeserni, moved to Aemonas Agar. However, there is nothing to prove that they were present specifically in Carnium. If they were in fact associated with the area, they would most likely have owned one or more villas discovered in the lowland. The owner or the owners of the three halved coins and the oil lamp could, on the other hand, have belonged to the army. The military victory against Mark Antony would be relevant to them, not at least in terms of morale, since the area around Carnium was not entirely peaceful. As early as 35 BC, unrest first manifested in the form of an attack on Aquileia and the sacking of Trieste. This was followed by Octavian expedition into Pannonia. From 14 BC to 10 BC, there were a series of rebellions in southern Pannonia and northern Dalmatia, which Roman writers referred to as Bellum Pannonicum. In 15 BC, the Romans conquered the Scordisci and annexed Noricum. In 13 BC, Augustus granted supreme military command in Illyricum to Marcus Agrippa. He was the very same general portrayed on the coins with crocodiles and was Augustus' most important ally. In this sense, the coins and the lamb could have been also intended to serve as a warning, as if to say, if Augustus managed to subdue Egypt, he will easily crush any local uprising. The connection to Egypt could be more personal, as the exactly same coins to the ones found in Carnium seem to have been used by individuals connected to Colonia Augusta Nemausus, where they were also minted. More specifically, veterans of Egyptian campaigns were awarded lands around the colony. In the area of ancient Nemausus, the motif from the coin persists to the modern day, as it is used as a seal of Nîmes, and the crocodile is incorporated into visual image of the Nîmes football team nicknamed the Crocodiles. However, not only veterans were connected to the Battle of Actium. The very same 13th legion that received its name after the Battle of Actium, the Gemina, was relocated after the conquest of Egypt to Colonia Julia Aemona to quell the military uprisings in 16 BC. That left now Portus, the port on the Ljubljanica River, burning and led to its ultimate decline. It could hardly be coincidental that the very same time that the Gemina was relocated to Aemona's Agar, crocodiles started to appear in Carnium. The dispatched soldiers would not only have known the symbolic meaning of the crocodile, but would have likely seen ones as some of them at least have probably participated in the battle that gave Augustus uncontested control of Mare Nostrum. The intimate connection between the battle and the legion, their knowledge of the symbolism, and the personal connection they had to all the relevant elements makes the soldiers that guarded the crossing over Sava River the most likely candidates for the owners of the crocodile-related items. Although the 13th Legion had its emblem, a lion, the crocodile symbolized their first major victory, and a significant one at that, after the legion has been reinstated. It's not unimaginable that some of the soldiers would keep a small portable object symbolizing their victory as an item of personal significance, as a kind of a good luck charm, or a physical representation of their belonging to a legion that triumphed over the crocodile. The division of the discussion in these two parts was intentional. The two presented viewpoints referred to the maker or designer of the objects, whose intent was communicated through the objects and its decoration, and the receiver or owner, the person who bought and used the object. What the first tried to communicate through the object does not necessarily translate directly in how the object was perceived by the owner. In a sense, it's easy for us who have an overview over the Roman period from a relatively all-knowing distance, and with almost endless stream of data at our disposal, to get carried away and expect that both sides had the perspective and knowledge similar to ours, and that the meaning and intent behind the object was communicated directly and flawlessly from maker to user. In Slovenian archaeology, in-depth theoretical debates about who inhabitants of Roman period Slovenia were revolve around Romanization and other related phenomena, predominantly in the funerary sphere. Generally, the most widespread is the notion that the term Romanization describes the interaction between the Roman newcomers and the indigenous population, as observable primarily in material culture. In traditional sense of Romanization, we can describe objects simply as means of spreading propaganda and securing power. While the spreading of what we perceive as Roman propaganda was likely indeed intentional, how it was in fact received can easily get overlooked. This is why we describe the setting in which the coins and oil lamp were found in such detail. Several studies of the imagery of such objects as coins and oil lamps have been done by Slovenian archaeologists, but mostly did not manage to overcome the Roman imperialistic point of view. That is to say, they focus on intention behind the object, while the people in whose hands the object ended up remained largely understudied. The Slovenian archaeological tradition focuses strongly on data obtained from excavation, partly because archaeology and classical philology are two entirely separate disciplines. Furthermore, Slovenian archaeology draws a sharp distinction between the Roman and prehistoric items. Accordingly, the question where our Romans came from and who they were is frequently addressed only in part using information obtained from inscriptions and ancient authors. Just as the migration of the civilian population are understudied, we rarely pay any attention to the movement of Roman military if the presence is not discernible from tangible artifacts. In other words, the Roman army is usually studied, and well studied at that, through the lens of military equipment, but not in terms of other accompanying objects. So, our work here is not yet done. While we hopefully solved the crocodiles of Carnium on a theoretical level at least, we need to emphasize that they are not unique to Slovenia. Despite no direct parallels for our oil lamp, in fact, the closest and the only exact parallel we could find is in Cartago, several other oil lamps from Slovenia nonetheless feature crocodiles. At least one is known from Colonia Julia Emona, where the discus is partly damaged, and several more from Colonia Ulpia Traiana Poetovio, which usually depicts crocodile and serpent. Sure enough, 13th Legion, Gemina, turned out to have been at both towns. After the unfortunate excursion to Teutoburg forest, the Legion returned to the territory of modern Slovenia and was, in 45 AD, stationed at Poetovio. It is important to underline that none of the lamps from Emona or Poetovio allude to the naval battle in Egypt as strongly as the specimen for Carnium. A further issue is that the majority of systematically published excavation of Roman period sites in Slovenia come from cemeteries, including principally the large cemeteries of Emona and Poetovio, as well as numerous smaller cemeteries across the country. This means that our dataset is heavily biased towards the funerary setting and not settlements. In this sense as well, the oil lamp from Carnium is an exception since it was found in the settlement. Parallels for the coins are problematic in their own way, as numismatic finds were until recently not fully illustrated in Slovenian archaeology, but indicated with simple circle with name of emperor written in it or date. Factors such as halving, damaging, legend, etc. are consequently not discernible at glance, but would need to be sought in the description for every single object. Roman imperial coinage numbers are usually provided, but the description are often very rudimentary. That meaning that you would get the Roman imperial coinage number, but not the description of the legend. So you would have to check the number with the catalog of imperial Roman coinage every single time. With the universal adoption of the digital photography, the practice of adding photos to the illustration section of publication fortunately became more common. While we can be fairly sure that more coins depicting crocodiles are out there, buried in reports or waiting to be unearthed, we are only aware of one parallel at Villa Rustica Mošnje, which is, however, not yet published, but it's relatively close to Kranj as well. What started as confused exclamation along the lines, "Why are there crocodiles in the foothills of the Alps?" has found a reasonably satisfactory conclusion. At the same time, it gave us idea to pursue these exotic creatures even further. And at this point, I would like to say that the excavation report for Kranj and Kieselstein excavation is out and available online. Here is the front cover. Unfortunately, for now, it's only in Slovenian, but it's a really massive publication. And the oil lamp that I was talking about is featured in exhibition that is currently traveling around Slovenia. It's titled Women's Stories, and the oil lamp interpretation focuses more on Cleopatra, but part of it is published online, and it includes a 3D model that Dr. Urankar made, and I can present as well now. So we have a 3D model of the oil lamp as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for having us. And I hope you enjoyed. And I think now it's more or less time for questions.
Thank you.